The humanitarian crisis in Gaza continues as a shaky ceasefire, in place now for 3 months, faces some big hurdles. Gaza authorities say more than 71,000 Palestinians have been killed since Israel launched its assault on the enclave in October of 2023. And according to UNICEF, over 100 children have just been killed since the ceasefire was announced this past October. To discuss the latest developments, I'm joined now by Khalil Jahshan. He is Executive Director of the Arab Center in Washington, D.C. And joining me is Sara Yael Hirschhorn. She is a historian at the University of Haifa and a fellow of the Jewish People Policy Institute in Jerusalem. And with us too is Nabeel Khoury. He is a former U.S. diplomat and the author of Bunker Diplomacy. Welcome to all of you to the show. Khalil Jahshan, let me start with you. We just talked with the former Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Olmert. I asked him for his views on the status of the current ceasefire. This is a ceasefire that was introduced last October. 400 Palestinians have been killed since that ceasefire was announced. This was Ehud Olmert's response to that. Let's listen.
Netanyahu's aim is to continue to control Gaza, not from the outside, but rather from the inside, with an Israeli military presence there. And that he didn't volunteer to adopt this agreement. He was forced to do it by President Trump. So question is not whether Netanyahu is enthusiastic. He is not, and he will not be, unless President Trump will use his power of persuasion in order to force Netanyahu to comply. Once the body of the last Israeli hostage is returned, which is something that President Trump himself keeps saying all the time. He met with the parents of the last Israeli hostage just a couple of weeks ago in Palm Beach, in Mar-a-Lago. And I think that, again, it gives an excuse, technical excuse for all sides, but this is something that needs to be done.
Sir Khalil, what is your response to that?
In terms of the general description of the situation in Gaza, I fully agree with Mr. Olmert in the sense that he highlighted the fact that Mr. Netanyahu and his government, his cabinet, are not necessarily interested in a genuine ceasefire in Gaza and end of conflict, if you will, with Hamas and other groups in Gaza. This has been clear from the very beginning. Unfortunately, Mr. Olmert is a maverick. He's one of very few Israelis, politicians and academics and others who basically are focused on the real reasons why this vulnerable ceasefire, I say vulnerable because it was born weak. It was not well thought of. Was not well designed. It had embedded in it basically the reasons for its potential failure, and that's what we're facing right now. In addition to what Mr. Olmert said, I would like to add that the Trump administration is not innocent in terms of what's happening right now in Gaza, whether it's the slow death sentence that the whole strip has been sentenced to, or the health and humanitarian crisis that everybody refers to and acknowledges. I think its inability to hold, if you will, Netanyahu's feet to the fire, so to speak, and keep him committed in spite of differences supposedly between the White House and the Israeli cabinet. So I cannot absolve the Trump administration from full responsibility. It's a partner to Israel in this policy, not necessarily an objective observer.
Sara, according to Gaza officials, Israel has violated the ceasefire almost 1,000 times. And as I pointed out, more than 400 Palestinians have been killed since October when that ceasefire was introduced, including 100 children. Here is the spokesman for UNICEF, James Elder. Let's listen to him.
More than 100 children have been killed in Gaza since the ceasefire of early October. That's roughly a girl or a boy killed here every day during a ceasefire.
So, Sarah, would it be fair to say that this is a ceasefire, as far as the Palestinians are concerned, in name only?
I think it would be fair to Palestinians who are governed by an organization, Hamas, that also has no interest in abiding by the ceasefire. They've said it out loud that they do not intend to disarm or and to disassemble. So I think Palestinians are as much victim of this, as Dr. Jahshan said, this kind of stillborn ceasefire as anyone else. I have no way of validating the figures that have been provided here, which I assume come also from the Hamas Ministry of Health. But certainly Palestinians are suffering, and they're suffering at the hands of their government as much as this ill-conceived ceasefire that was supposed to be a 3-day period of transition that has now taken more than 3 months. So we are really at an impasse here.
So, as you point out, Sarah, this is, as you said, a ceasefire that was stillborn. So, where do you think it goes to from here?
Well, I'm very concerned that the ceasefire will ultimately collapse. The Trump administration, which had been the impetus behind this ceasefire, and as Dr. Jahshan pointed out, was very, I think, strong-armed Benjamin Netanyahu into abiding by it, is quite busy with other projects, notably Venezuela, Iran, simply Greenland. It's very hard to say where the Trump administration will go next. And is distracted from this project in Gaza, and without the push of the Trump administration holding this together and recruiting partners, frankly, that will be able to govern on the ground instead of Hamas, which, again, has not signaled any intention to abide by the ceasefire. I don't really see what will prevent Israel and Hamas from going back to some kind of full-scale war unless the thumb of the United States and its partners is put very strongly on the scale.
Nabeel Khoury, during my conversation with the former Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Olmert, I referenced an essay or an op-ed that he wrote in the Israeli newspaper Haaretz last year, which was headlined, "Enough is enough, Israel is committing war crimes." I talked to him about this and about why he thought Israel was committing war crimes, but he stopped short of calling this a genocide. He said it doesn't reach the level of a genocide. Let's listen to him again.
They wrote, and I repeated endlessly almost, that I don't think there was genocide. I don't think that there was a government policy to accomplish war crimes or to kill indefinitely everyone that is the essence of what a war crime is all about. But there were all crimes committed, largely because at the time that I wrote this, it was accepted by everyone. There was a consensus in Israel that there was no purpose for continuing the military operation, that people were killed in an operation which was not serving any international national security interest of the state of Israel, and that in such an operation, Israelis, soldiers, and possibly we didn't know then, but we knew later, also hostages were killed and many non-involved Palestinians. The combination of all this within the context of a non-legitimate military operation without any purpose, without any cause that can justify it, it constitutes a war crime.
So, Nabeel, what is your response to that?
Well, to abuse the words of William Shakespeare, what's in a name? What's going on in Gaza? Smells just as foul, whether you call it a genocide or mass murder. In the end, people make the distinction in anticipation of some kind of a decision against the Israeli action in Gaza. But we all know that international justice does not apply here, only brute force. So I'm not too interested in what Mr. Olmert calls it. In the end of the day, civilians were being massacred for the last 2 years, And the ceasefire right now means absolutely nothing, because if not through direct fire, the flooding of tents in the cold weather is killing children every day, and nobody is doing anything about it. And Israel is even preventing humanitarian aid from coming in. This is absolutely inhuman and atrocious. And I really don't care what they call it. It's a bloody hell for the people living in Gaza.
Sarah, I want to get your response to something that Ehud Olmert said as well. Part of his answer there, he said that Israelis do not believe that Prime Minister Netanyahu had any clearly defined goal when he launched this military operation against Gaza, that there was no clearly defined security interest that was outlined by the Prime Minister.
In the initial phases, there was a clearly defined goal, which was to disarm and, disassemble Hamas, to rescue the hostages, and to restore a kind of ceasefire, or at least some kind of truce. But what happened along the way, 2 years in, was that not all that many of these goals were really achieved. The hostages, who thankfully, except for Ron Ghibli, whose body must be returned, have come home, dead and alive, but only through negotiations with Hamas and periodic releases of hostages. But most certainly, after several months, it became clear, I think, to most Israelis, and as you recall, the Israeli military fighting this war is not primarily the standing army. It's mostly hundreds of thousands of reservists that are being called up from their daily life, their jobs, their studies, their families, their businesses, and their lives to prosecute a war against Hamas, which frankly, I think 2 years in has failed. Hamas is still standing. It does not seem to be interested in disarming itself. So I can't say that even if Netanyahu and his government went in with a certain goal in mind, that they've achieved it.
Khalil, Jahshan, Hamas said last Sunday that it will dissolve its government in Gaza once there is a technocratic leadership committee that will take over. That's part of the peace plan. But the other thing is that there's no timeline in this peace plan. We don't know when that is going to happen. The phase 2 also calls for the deployment of this international stabilization force. We don't know whether that is going to happen or when that will happen as well. I mean, realistically, do you see any of this happening?
It will be very difficult to see any of this happening beyond the half step that has been taken so far, which is that weak, if you will, ceasefire that was declared and hasn't been enforced. Beyond that, that's why the process is stuck, and I'm not optimistic about it moving forward for all of these reasons we've discussed before that are inherent to the process itself. And they were lacking from the very beginning, from the back to the point when the administration began formulating these 21 initially, then became 20 points. Hamas has expressed its interest in the ceasefire for whatever reason. It has, of course, its own reasons. But I think there is confusion, as we heard a little while ago from Sara, with regard whether Hamas did violate or not violate the ceasefire. Of course, both sides violated the ceasefire here and there, although the responsibility lies much more on the Israeli side as a state, if you will, that could enforce behavior on its side. But Hamas has accepted, if you will, to proceed forward with the ceasefire and with the agreement. But there is a big difference between saying Hamas is refusing to abide by the ceasefire and equate that with Hamas is refusing to disarm or refusing to disband. Is Israel being asked to disarm? Is Israel being asked to disband? So the whole process is out of whack. There is no symmetry in the process. I disagree with the concept that Israel or Netanyahu did not have a strategy. As a matter of fact, if we go back to October 7 or October 8, 23, Israel did have a strategy. It was an ill-devised strategy. It was basically revenge. And it's not just Netanyahu. Netanyahu adopted that, but Israeli society as a whole got involved in the same mindset that we need to revenge the act committed on October 7 by Hamas.
Sarah, what do you make of Khalil's point that both sides have obligations under the ceasefire, but Israel actually has the greater responsibility because it is a state which can enforce a ceasefire?
Well, I mean, I think that Dr. Jahshan is also suggesting that, Israel should also be disassembling itself. And, it's a state. It's not a prescribed terror organization like Hamas. I can't really say that the violations fall more firmly on the Israeli side. I can say that Israel, I think, has committed war crimes or mistakes in the prosecution of this war that, as Prime Minister Olmert himself suggested, that this has not been a perfectly prosecuted war free of, humanitarian casualties or of serious breaches. But I can say that Hamas also is an intractable enemy that is vowed to the destruction of the state of Israel, that is willing to commit more massacres like October 7th, and is frankly trying to rebuild itself in order to do so, and is not interested in following through with the ceasefire. So I think that, we have a situation where we have a state living aside a terror organization that is holding its power not only over its civilian public that it's using as human shields in the prosecution of its war, but a state living alongside a illegitimate entity that is ruling this piece of territory, and that's a unstable and frankly untenable situation. So this has been true for the last 20 years, but certainly the momentum has accelerated after October 7th that there was a need to try to rectify this arrangement, but I don't see that the Trump peace plan is succeeding in doing so.
Nabeel Khoury, what is your view on what Sarah just said, that we have a state, Israel, which is a member of the United Nations, living side by side with what she termed a terror organization?
Well, I think Sarah ignores both what Hamas leaders are saying and international law. According to international law, Israel is an occupying power. For all that Israel withdrew its troops from Gaza in 2005, it turned Gaza into an open-air prison. And therefore, as the occupying power, it has a responsibility to protect the lives of those it occupies and rules over. And it has clearly not been protecting the Palestinian lives, not in Gaza and not in the West Bank. The other thing is, Hamas leaders have repeatedly said, maybe Sara is not listening to them, that they accept the ceasefire, they accept even to disarm, provided Israel withdraws from Gaza. And that is a logical thing to expect. How can you disarm when the occupying army is still behind supposedly this yellow or pink line or whatever color they gave it? They are still in Gaza and still planning an assault on Gaza City.
Right.
The goals are clear. It is to empty out Gaza from its Palestinian inhabitants. And here the goals of the Trump and Netanyahu are the same. The only difference is in tactics. Trump would rather do it by slow, targeted operations against leadership and not have a full occupation on land.
All right,
and Netanyahu is ruled by the extreme right wing that he governs with, which wants the land and doesn't want a single Palestinian to be on.
All right, let me get Sarah's views on that. Sarah, go ahead.
I think it's very difficult to talk about international law when we start this story on October 7th in a very clear and blatant breach of international law. And Hamas remains, in the eyes of the international community, a prescribed terror organization. Whether or not they have the ability or capability right now to govern is something else, but it doesn't change the status of what the organization is. If you want to talk about the occupation, I think we can have a different conversation about the West Bank. But Israel has not occupied the Gaza Strip since 2006. Hamas came to power and took over there, and they are responsible for the fate of Gazan civilians, including, frankly, the emptying and killing of Gazan civilians in the prosecution of this war, where they used their entire population as a human shield against the attack by Israel after October 7th. I think we have a very difficult situation here that Gazan civilians are clearly suffering, and we can have a separate conversation another day about what's happening in the West Bank, which is also an unstable and untenable situation, which Israel actually has far more involvement in the day-to-day life of Palestinians as the occupying power. But I think it's very difficult to have that conversation about Gaza, and also to say that the onus of international law falls upon Israel when you're dealing with a massacre that happened on October 7th against Israeli civilians, and a terrorist organization, as conceived by the rest of the international community, continuing to govern this territory.
Yeah, let me go to Khalil Jahshan. Khalil, what do you make of what we're hearing about the Israeli occupation? Sara makes the point that we have to distinguish between what is happening in Gaza and what is happening in the West Bank. Well, since October of 2023, more than 1,000 Palestinians have been killed on the West Bank, both by Israeli military forces as well as colonial settlers in that occupied territory. And then the Israelis just announced about a week ago that it will be going ahead with a new expansion of settlements called the E1 plan, which will effectively divide the West Bank into north and south.
Well, unfortunately, I think, as Sara said, this would be probably an endless debate. And I agree with her that history did not start on October 7, 2023. Neither did it start in 1967. Neither did it start, as she implied, in 2006. History started way back in 1948. As a matter of fact, even in 1896, with the birth of the Zionist idea of establishing a Jewish state in Palestine. So what needs to be done right now, we can argue these points ad nauseum, is not going to solve the problem. The problem will be solved, for example, in the current plan that everybody supposedly was excited about and began to implement a while back, the Trump plan, the 20-point plan, instead of starting with point 1, 2, 3, 4, that are essentially meaningless. We need to jump to point 18, 19, and 20. This is a political question that needs a political solution. Short of that, I think we will be arguing this point for centuries to come.
Okay, Nabeel Khoury, you have been a diplomat. And of course, the big question that is being asked right now is what role for the Trump administration to move this process forward? It's sometimes referred to as the Trump factor. There's some Palestinian academics, analysts, and leaders who've expressed concern that the United States may have lost interest in Gaza. As Sara pointed out earlier on, it's preoccupied with a number of other places around the world. In fact, we talked with a Palestinian analyst just last week, and she told us that she believes that the purpose of the ceasefire was to make Gaza invisible, as she put it. But do you see the Trump administration getting as involved as it was in the future in getting this resolved?
The short answer is no. I think Donald Trump probably underestimated the complexity of the problem and underestimated the differences in vision between how he looks at the situation and how Netanyahu and the right-wing government look at it. So he will lose interest. He is known for that. And he does have several big problems on his hands. In the end, I think as an American diplomat, I dealt with many political officers at the Israeli embassy here in Washington. I've also visited with Israel. I've discussed with Israeli intelligence analysts, and they have some excellent analysts, even at the Mossad, who understand the situation and understand that Israeli occupation, and there is really no other way, no mincing of words, it is an occupation. There is no way of sweetening this pill. It will continue to cause problems until there is a recognition of Palestinian nationalism, Palestinian attachment to their land, and in the end of the day, Palestinians as human beings who deserve to live with respect and humanity like everybody else.
Khalil, that's a very dark outlook, very pessimistic. Do you share that?
I do. I think basically, even though we had pockets of resistance, if you will, throughout the long history of this conflict, where we felt closer to the possibility of a political solution here and there, but I don't think any of that materialized for the same reasons that we are discussing today. Why Gaza, the Gaza plan, ceasefire plan, is falling apart in front of our eyes. So, and we're learning the same lessons again. As long as we are not focused on the real reasons, the fact that we have two people here and we have national aspirations to deal with, that this is a political question that needs to be tackled, then we will continue to run in circles. And running in a cul-de-sac gives you the false sense that you are moving forward, but you're not.
That's it for this edition of The Heat. I'm your host, Anand Naidu, in Washington, D.C. If you have comments or questions you want us to follow up on, please leave a comment in the app or email heatpodcast@cgtnamerica.com. And if you'd like to support the show, the best way is simply to share it with someone who might enjoy it. See you next time.